British Columbians are just 7 weeks away from heading to the polls. And for Conservatives or free enterprise-loving British Columbians, that leaves us with two choices. Stick with the governing BC Liberals or go with the much maligned Conservative Party of BC. The Liberals have been in power now for 16 years, and while they're not perfect, they've done a pretty decent job, I think. And the Conservatives, well, they can't even get a leader elected successfully. You know, every election it comes down to this. Do we vote BC Conservative and risk splitting the vote and allowing the NDP to be elected? Or stick with the safe bet of Christy Clark and the BC Liberals? You know, it's a tough question that even splits federal Conservatives in the province. Many of the MLAs in the government caucus are actually federal Conservatives. But what if I told you I believe the BC Conservative Party, after all the bizarre stuff they've been through, has been hijacked by New Democrats, who may just be trying to split the vote to ensure the NDP see victory on May 9th? Let me explain. As I mentioned earlier, the party is leaderless despite a leadership campaign over the summer. But currently, they're beginning to nominate candidates, and they currently have their Director of Policy and Communications, John Twigg, as their party spokesperson and essentially a de facto party leader. But who is John Twigg? Well, he's a longtime New Democrat and was the press secretary for former NDP Premier Dave Barrett. But that was 40 years ago. So what about recently? What's Twigg been up to? Well, Twigg supported and donated to the leadership campaign of John Horgan in 2011. And last year when he interviewed Horgan for his show, he had this to say.
So anyway, I had a little chat with Rachel in the hallway years ago. But
she's very impressive.
I think she's doing a great job.
What kind of conservative says Rachel Notley is doing a good job? I don't think it's even debatable anymore that the only people who actually approve of the Alberta NDP and Premier Notley are NDPers. But apparently the BC Conservative Party's public face for this election thinks so too. He would also go on to say how much he liked Bernie Sanders later in that interview as well. So while the BC Conservative Party is not officially linked to the federal party, most provincial members are also federal Conservative members. But John Twigg is no fan of our former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He once even described him as a, quote, tyrant. Now, if that isn't a classic Harper derangement syndrome case from a New Democrat, I don't know what is. But it wasn't just one off-the-cuff remark either. Twigg really had a problem with Stephen Harper. Writing about Trudeau's election in early 2016, Twigg said, quote, "That's a welcome radical change from Harper, who had the heart of a mannequin," unquote. And back in 2012, shortly after Clark became Premier, he wrote, quote, "Clark needs to do more like her first act in office, raise the minimum wage after a ridiculous, crazy, and unconscionable 10-year freeze by her predecessor, and less pandering to Prime Minister Stephen Harper and his big oil politics," unquote. Those don't really sound like the comments of a true Conservative, but more like an NDP operative who is now becoming an opportunist trying to recreate the formula that has in the past been the only way the NDP have won their 3 elections in our province's history. You gotta split the vote. Take the 96 election, for instance. The BC Liberals actually won the popular vote by over 2%, but lost the election due to a strong performance from the BC Reform Party pulling in over 9% of the vote. And this year, with the BC Greens set to put up a strong performance under Andrew Weaver, the NDP will need a strong BC Conservative performance in order to have a chance to dethrone the longest-serving government in Canada come May 9th. But if you are a Conservative in BC and not exactly enamored by Clark and the BC Liberals and were considering supporting the BC Conservatives, then do so knowing that they have a New Democrat of 40 years who thinks Rachel Notley is doing a good job at the helm of Alberta. For the Rebel.Media, I'm Christopher Wilson. Thanks for watching. I'll be talking a lot about the BC election and the lead up to the vote on May 9th. Click subscribe on our YouTube channel. Never miss a video.